Our story starts in the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, and more specifically the Council Chambers. Anakin has just received intelligence from Palpatine that Grievous was located on the outer rim planet of Utapau, and the Council believed eliminating Grievous would end the war. Anakin hesitantly told the other Council members that Palpatine had nominated him to lead the mission, but Master Windu shut him down. Windu, Ki-Adi-Mundi and Yoda all agreed that the more experienced Master Obi-Wan should go, but the Jedi Master could see the disappointment across Anakin's face. He had already doubted the decision to ask Anakin to spy on Palpatine, but now was the time to stand up for Anakin. Obi-Wan told the Council that Anakin should join him on his mission to Utapau, and this both satisfied the Chancellor's initial request, as well as the Council's. Windu was reluctant, as he wanted Anakin to continue spying on the Chancellor, and the Council turned to Yoda's hologram for a final decision. The Grand Master panned his eyes around the room, and the other present Council members fell silent with anticipation. Yoda finally let out a sigh and turned towards Anakin. The sole Jedi Knight on the Council looked to the ground as if he was embarrassed, and he expected Yoda to add to his misery, but in a calming voice, Yoda told him he would join Obi-Wan on Utapau. After several days of mistreatment from the Council, Anakin finally felt like he was a part of the esteemed group of 12, and he looked to Obi-Wan. The tension between the two heroes of the Republic was lifted, and as was some of the tension with the Council. Windu and Ki-Adi-Mundi saw that they were being overruled, but this left the question of what to do with Palpatine. With Anakin about to go to Utapau, the Council decided to delay their spying of Palpatine and wait for a reaction after the capture of Grievous. Obi-Wan and Anakin left the temple in good spirits, but as they made their journey to the landing deck in an AAT gunship, Obi-Wan saw Anakin clutching his head with his hands. The older of the Jedi knelt down to his friend and former Padawan, and he tried to comfort him. Anakin was struck by the sudden realization that he would be leaving Padme, and it was as if all of the recent barrage of emotions had finally taken its toll. Obi-Wan had never seen Anakin in such a state, but he still maintained much of his composure to instruct Commander Cody to await his departure. As the gunship drew towards his cruiser, Obi-Wan then ordered the clone pilot to move the ship and drop them off at the Senate apartment complex and to the home of one person who could help Anakin. In the afternoon light of Coruscant, the apartment of Senator Amidala almost sparkled thanks to elaborate decorations and furnishings, and its owner rushed out when she saw Obi-Wan and Anakin. The heavily pregnant Senator Amidala showed concern, but she was reluctant to show any connection to Anakin around Obi-Wan. Padme summoned her handmaidens to help Anakin, but then she saw Obi-Wan's face. It was not one of anger, but of disappointment and worry. In that moment, Padme realized her marriage to Anakin was not as secret as it seemed. She quickly looked to Anakin, and the Jedi Knight was somewhat recovering, so she told him that they should tell Obi-Wan their secret. Anakin looked at Padme with a mix of reluctant acceptance and fear, and had this conversation happened after his talk with Palpatine in the galaxy's Opera House, he would have categorically refused. But now, he felt like he had the backing of Obi-Wan against the Council. With one last look towards Padme, Anakin told Obi-Wan everything. In what seemed to be a stream of consciousness rather than coherent speech, Obi-Wan listened carefully to Anakin, and most of what he heard did not surprise him. But when Anakin began to talk about his recent interactions with the Chancellor, Obi-Wan was shocked. He had known that Anakin was close to the Chancellor, but now it seemed that it was all planned from their first encounter. Palpatine hadn't lied when he said he would watch over Anakin with great interest on Naboo, and now it was culminating in creating friction between he and the Jedi. Obi-Wan wanted to get angry at Anakin for not seeing through Palpatine's manipulations, but refrained from doing so, and listened until the end. Anakin eventually finished his story, and looked away from his master, whom he knew would be disappointed in him. Instead, Obi-Wan walked away from the sofas, and out towards the balcony, and gazed at the rest of the Federal District. The Jedi Master calmed himself after the startling revelations, and he wondered what he should tell the Council. Anakin had just shown him a massive amount of trust by telling him his secrets, and Obi-Wan now decided he would help his old Padawan. Obi-Wan turned away from the light and back to the apartment, then told Anakin and Padme that he would protect them to the best of his ability. The Jedi Knight and Senator were relieved. It was as if the weight of the galaxy had been finally lifted off of their shoulders. Obi-Wan suggested that Padme should be given a complete medical examination, whilst he and Anakin pursued Grievous. Padme thought that going to Utapau would help to distract Anakin from his nightmares, and the overall Jedi Knight reluctantly complied. Anakin and Obi-Wan bid farewell to Padme and her handmaidens, and they returned to Obi-Wan's cruiser to go to the Outer Rim. Though their journey from Padme's apartment to Obi-Wan's cruiser was short, there was one person who spotted Anakin's movement. This person was Palpatine. The Sith Lord had deliberately told Anakin that he would go to Utapau, as he thought the Council would deny Anakin the request, just as they had done for his rank of Master. But now, he was shocked that the Council had actually sent Anakin, and even worse, Obi-Wan was still going with him. Anakin was imperative to Order 66 to take over the Jedi Temple and his future plans in his galactic empire, so Palpatine needed to modify his current plan. The separation of Anakin and Obi-Wan was vital, so he needed to modify the position of Grievous. Palpatine entered his private office, where he maintained all of his nefarious schemes, and the Sith Lord searched for his droid commander. Grievous was waiting on Utapau, and the cyborg bowed to the hologram of Sidious. In a slight deviation from the original plan, Grievous would still be dispatching the Separatists to Mustafar, but the cyborg would set a trap to separate the two Jedi. Grievous was pleased at the prospect of joining Skywalker for the first time, but not with the plan, and he also doubted the future of the Separatists after the fall of Dooku. Sidious brushed off these doubts, and he ordered Grievous to prepare a suitable trap. Back in Obi-Wan's fleet, the Jedi Master was joined by Anakin on the bridge of the Venator-class Star Destroyer known as the Vigilance. Obi-Wan could still sense concern within his old Padawan, so he assured him that their mission would go smoothly, as would Padme's medical check. A navigational officer walked up to the two Jedi and told them that they were approaching Utapau, so the two Jedi prepared the 212th Battalion and the remainder of the 501st Legion. But before their imminent approach, Commander Cody asked the Jedi to go to the holotable, where Commander Tano was waiting for them. The former Padawan had tried to contact the Jedi earlier, but they were in Padme's apartment. Since her earlier attempt, Ahsoka had apprehended Maul, and the Zabrak's words in the throne room were ones which left questions. Now Ahsoka was presented with the chance to get answers, and she was surprised to see Anakin with Obi-Wan. Anakin looked tired in her opinion, and the Jedi Knight could sense her concern. He was aware that she knew about Padme, but not about the child, so after a look to Obi-Wan, he revealed the same story that he had told in Padme's apartment. Ahsoka was not as surprised as Obi-Wan had been, but she did question the timing of such a monumental event. As she was returning to Coruscant to deliver Maul, she decided to reserve her questions until they reunited and wished him a smooth capture of Grievous. As the hologram of Ahsoka disappeared, the Jedi returned to the starboard bridge. The fleet then entered the Utapau system, and the Jedi sensed something was amiss. The crew did not see anything out of the ordinary from their scanners, but the Jedi nevertheless travelled to the planet in their starfighters. When they descended through the atmosphere, Obi-Wan and Anakin set course for Pau City, and the highest level of the sinkhole. The two Jedi saw the expectant Pauans waiting for their arrival, and the Port Administrator Tion Medon was at the head of the queue. Anakin stood back to observe the surroundings, whilst Obi-Wan stepped towards the Pauans to obtain more information on Grievous. Medon was reluctant to divulge such knowledge, both fearing for his life and those of the natives, and Obi-Wan looked to the other levels. Anakin then coldly proclaimed that Grievous was not amongst the levels, and Obi-Wan looked to Medon for confirmation. The silence from the Pauan told him all he needed to know, and the Jedi politely bowed and flew to the upper levels to try and find any clues. This turned out to be a huge mistake, as Grievous had left behind much of his legions of battle droids. Anakin and Obi-Wan swooped away in opposing directions when the droids started to fire, and they called for the clones above Utapau to help them. Instead of the cyborg general, a tactical droid was placed to command the droids. Obi-Wan had learned to not question Anakin's moves, and he watched from his own ship as Anakin deflected all of the incoming blaster fire. As the droids toppled from these hits, Anakin force-pulled the tactical droid and cleanly sliced it into pieces. The Jedi Knight was not finished though, and after he ordered his squadron to move in, he looked for anything which could locate Grievous. Much to his disappointment, Grievous had erased all evidence of his presence, and the two Jedi left the clones to complete the takeover, then returned to the fleet to talk to the Council. In comparison to the previous meeting, there were fewer Jedi Council members attending, but this didn't prevent them from deciding that the move by Grievous was suspicious. Now that he was away from Coruscant and from Palpatine's influence, Anakin was not clouded by the dark side, and he could now see that Palpatine's intel was rather vague. Windu was of the opinion that this was not a mere mistake from Palpatine, and he had deliberately told Anakin about a false location, to try and create tension amongst the Council and move Obi-Wan. Yoda knew that Windu wanted to make a move against the Chancellor, but they needed more evidence than suspicions. Anakin then suggested that they should wait for Ahsoka to return, as she had captured Maul. The Council looked to each other for any better suggestions, and the silence made it clear that Anakin's was the best. The Jedi Knight left the meeting with Obi-Wan and asked Ahsoka to deliver Maul at the staging area near the military base as they resumed the search for Grievous. Back in the office of Chancellor Palpatine, the Sith Lord was alerted to the presence of the Jedi on Utapau, and his plan to get Master Kenobi to Utapau was a success. Now, Sidious needed to divide the Jedi and get Anakin back under his control and lure him to Coruscant. The Sith Lord was well aware that Anakin was tempted by the dark side to save Padme, and it was the Senator who Palpatine could use to draw Anakin. Palpatine had secretly monitored Amidala for the past few days, but his network of spies had not seen her leaving her apartment, other than her usual trips to the Senate debates. This annoyed Palpatine, and he decided to draw Amidala into a meeting. The Senator would receive the Chancellor's request when she was in her apartment, and she quickly reached out to Anakin for his advice. Bail Organa was also in the room with her and her handmaidens, and with Anakin and also Obi-Wan, they decided it was worth the risk to try and find more about Palpatine's motives. Padme took the precaution of bringing her handmaidens to the meeting and asked them to wait outside of Palpatine's office as she entered alone. The Chancellor was seated at his desk and welcomed the Senator into his office. Padme politely took her seat, but refrained from showing any emotion and asked Palpatine why she'd been summoned. The Chancellor got off of his chair and he gazed out of the window to look at Coruscant's cityscape. In a rather slow and deliberate voice, Palpatine told Padme that Anakin had shared worries about her health and he was here to help her. Padme took her time to absorb Palpatine's words, and in light of their previous discussion with Obi-Wan, she looked at the Chancellor's offer with suspicion. She showed absolutely nothing on her face, however, and she politely rejected his offer. Palpatine assured her that his extensive medical services were superior, but Padme stood her ground and told him that her medics had yet to fail her. As Palpatine's face partially turned towards her, Padme saw a flash of hate, which briefly shook her to her soul, and she almost gasped but kept her composure. Now she was convinced that Palpatine was hiding something, but she wouldn't get any answers without the Jedi. The Senator got up from her seat and quickly thanked Palpatine for the offer, then returned to her apartment. As the door closed to his office, Palpatine's eyes narrowed and he realised that the Senator was playing her own game. Alongside tracking Amidala's movements, Palpatine had taken the opportunity to track some of the Senators, especially those who were not under his control, and he began to see small gatherings within rooms of the Senate office building. The Senate of Naboo's latest visit gave him more reasons to investigate, and he would show the annoyingly defiant Senator his true power. But as Palpatine got to his feet, he sensed a disturbance in the Force. After his capture by Ahsoka Tano and the clones, Maul was contained by a Mandalorian vault, but he knew he would still have a role to play in the war. As the ship approached Coruscant, Maul could feel the faint presence of his old master, which was masked through the dark side. The Zabrak laughed at the thought that the Jedi had yet to sense him, and he predicted the Jedi Council would soon want his answers. The ship now docked, and after most of the clones returned to the military base, Rex and Ahsoka were outside of Maul's cell with Master Windu. The Master of the Order wanted to question Maul, but now considered the situation to be a Republic matter, and one outside of Ahsoka's role as a citizen. Everyone fell silent at these words, until Rex spoke up. The clone commander questioned Windu's decision, and he asked the entire Jedi Council to be present, not just Windu. The defiance of Rex reminded Windu of General Skywalker, and normally he would have brushed off such a request. However, the previous council meeting lingered on his mind, and if they were to find the mysterious Sith, they would need to combine their minds. So it was against his instincts that Windu agreed to discuss Ahsoka's involvement with the council. Windu sensibly used the holotable aboard the destroyer, and the Jedi Master was able to gather half of the council to discuss what to do with Maul. The council were as divided as they had been when deciding Anakin's mission to Utapau, and once more the decision rested upon Yoda. The Grand Master found this decision to be considerably easier, and he decided that Ahsoka should continue to be a part of the interrogation, but Rex could not. Just as the council meeting came to an end, Anakin and Obi-Wan received a transmission from Commander Cody on the surface of Utapau, and there was a disturbance from the outside of Pau City. The real forces of General Grievous had been lurking, whilst the Jedi were solely focused on Pau City, and now Cody was trapped. The Jedi now split up, with Obi-Wan going to draw Grievous away from the trapped clones, whilst Anakin mounted a rescue. The Jedi Master swooped down through the clouds and scanned the area for his old enemy. With the help of his astromech, he quickly zeroed in on the epicenter of the battle and the cyborg himself. Obi-Wan used his position of elevation and asked his astromech to take control of the ship. As the starfighter rained cannon fire on Grievous and his surrounding droids, Obi-Wan stood imperiously on top of the ship and deflected the blaster fire. As the droids started to topple, Obi-Wan leapt from his starfighter and down towards Grievous. The cyborg had only ignited 2 of his blades to deflect the cannon fire, and now he reacted by deploying 2 more. Obi-Wan spotted this, however, and severed the 2 limbs with a precise cut, and Grievous growled in pain and anger. The Jedi Master drew Grievous away from the large sinkhole and back out to the desert plains. This was what both combatants wanted, and Grievous in particular was ordered by Sidious to separate Anakin and Obi-Wan. However, what the cyborg had not accounted for in his calculations was Obi-Wan, and the Jedi Master was determined to put an end to him. The Jedi displayed an unmatched level of defense to counter the whirlwind of blades moving towards him, and they were gradually shifting towards another sinkhole. Both saw this as the setting for the end of their duel, and Grievous was the first to blink. After using solely his lightsabers in the duel, Grievous decided to use his enhanced limbs, and his claw-like leg extended into Obi-Wan's midsection. The impact caused him to lose balance and fall over the sinkhole, but he used the force to drag him back towards the edge. As he held onto the edge with his fingertips, he was reminded of his duel with Maul on Naboo, but Grievous did not have the same overconfidence. The cyborg stamped on the ground towards Obi-Wan, which caused the Jedi to begin losing his grip, and his fate looked inevitable. The lightsabers hummed as they slashed the ground for their final attack, but Obi-Wan remained calm. Grievous was not distracted by Obi-Wan's serenity, but soon he looked down to see a blue lightsaber through his chest. The organs within the cyborg began to implode, and the body soon followed. As the almighty warrior fell to the floor, Obi-Wan peered over the body to find Anakin casually standing behind Grievous. Anakin had managed to rescue the clones by cleverly using his starfighter to draw the droids away, and as the clones escaped onto the desert plains, Anakin laid down the cover fire. As the number of droids dwindled, he sensed his old master in danger and left Cody to clear the droids. The Jedi Knight quickly caught up to the duel and assessed the situation on the ground. Then, as Grievous twirled his blades at Obi-Wan, he stabbed the cyborg in his back. Now, Anakin helped his master to his feet and returned his lightsaber so they could end the battle and talk to the Council. The Jedi quickly helped Cody and the other clones to clear out the rest of the droids, and then they travelled back to the fleet. In front of the Council, the 2 Jedi revealed that they had eliminated Grievous, but the faces of Windu and Shaak-Ti looked rather grave. The other Jedi all turned to Windu, and the Master of the Order told them about the findings of Maul. The Zabrak had rather willingly and somewhat proudly reiterated his words on Mandalore, and the mysterious Sidious was pursuing Anakin. This all but confirmed that Sidious was indeed masquerading as Palpatine, and the worst fears of the Jedi were now realised. Anakin felt horrified that his supposed mentor had manipulated him, but what disturbed him more was the thought of a Sith Lord being around Padme and their unborn children. He felt an overwhelming urge to return to Coruscant, and with the mission to Utapau complete, the Council allowed the request. Despite Windu's desires to initiate a quick capture, Yoda insisted that they should be more patient. As Palpatine had managed to evade them for several decades, Yoda respected the threat enough to order more Jedi to travel to Coruscant from the Outer Rim. The role of Windu was to keep an eye on Palpatine, whilst Anakin and Obi-Wan secretly asked Ahsoka to protect Padme. Palpatine, though, had shifted his focus away from the Senator, and with the fall of Grievous, his plan to separate Anakin and Obi-Wan seemed to be in jeopardy, so it was time to unleash his secret weapon. The Sith had discovered that Anakin was slightly ahead of Obi-Wan's fleet, and now was the time to deploy Order 66. Aboard the Venator-class Star Destroyer known as the Vigilance, the 2 sets of doors adjoining the starboard to the holotable opened, and Cody wordlessly stepped through. Obi-Wan turned from the front of the bridge and raised an eyebrow at Cody's movements, but he trusted the commander enough to not interfere. Soon, however, the Jedi had a bad feeling about letting Cody go, and with his lightsaber close to hand, he walked towards the doors. As the Jedi Master moved to open them, he heard the crew behind him standing up, and he quickened his steps. Obi-Wan then manually opened the doors via a switch on the side, but he was greeted by a blaster between his eyes. Unknown to Obi-Wan, his supposedly loyal clone commander was under the control of Darth Sidious, as were most of the clone troopers across the galaxy. The Jedi Master had to somehow reach the other Jedi, so he could determine if he was an isolated target, or if this was a widespread attack. The Jedi could hear the sounds of blasters being loaded all around him, as well as the footsteps of the incoming reinforcements from other parts of the ship, and Cody ordered the clones to fire. In a blur of blue, Obi-Wan's survivor's instinct kicked in, and he effortlessly reflected the bolt back to the clones. Obi-Wan was precise enough to merely injure them, and he managed to buy himself enough time to block the second wave of clones, then searched for Anakin. The Jedi Knight wasn't too far away from Obi-Wan, and he was pleased to see that Obi-Wan was alive. Anakin seemed to be the sole survivor of the sudden attack, as similar distressing calls were all over the Jedi channels, and he now tried to find why the clones had suddenly turned against them. Obi-Wan, though, did not have time for an investigation, as clones were rapidly breaking down the sets of doors to the bridge. As Anakin could hear the clones on the other end of the transmission, he quickly looked around at his unaffected crew and ordered them to slow their progress to Coruscant to help Obi-Wan. Though the crew were instructed by Sidious to not touch Anakin, the order still prevented them from helping other Jedi. Anakin slammed his hand onto the controls of the bridge in frustration, and if they were not willing to follow him, then he would now take matters into his own hands. The Jedi began to barge officers out of the way, and once he identified the position of Obi-Wan's ship, he altered the speed of his ship to intercept it. Whilst Anakin's clones were squabbling over whether or not to stop him, the Jedi burst through them all to go to the hangar. There he jumped into his starfighter and soared out of the hangar before its exit had completed its opening, and he bridged the distance to Obi-Wan's Venator. Anakin could see his old master on the bridge, but fatigue seemed inevitable, even for Obi-Wan. The Jedi Knight decided to use his immunity to Order 66, and he pointed his starfighter down towards the bridge to try and distract the clones. As more and more clones breached the doors to the bridge, Anakin zoomed overhead with several loops, and the clones fell for the distraction. Many of those who were chasing Obi-Wan changed their target to the younger Jedi, and Anakin positioned himself above the hangar doors to attack. Below him, Obi-Wan had read the plan of Anakin for once, and he was grateful for the intervention. As the number of clones reduced, Obi-Wan took advantage and pushed the clones out of the door. Then, he used the time to contact the Jedi Council, and their positions were similar to his own. Thanks to Yoda ordering the Jedi back to Coruscant, the Jedi were close to each other, so most of the high-ranking Jedi were able to work together to combat Order 66. Those at the Jedi Temple were not quite as fortunate, and Windu was torn between going for Palpatine or coordinating the defense. After consulting with the incoming Yoda, Windu was once again convinced to hold off until the Jedi returned, and he began to escort the younglings and the initiates to safety. These younger Jedi were then transported into an assortment of shuttles, and whatever transport was left in the temple hangar. As the last of them left for its designated safe world, Windu finally received the transmissions he was hoping for as the Jedi started to arrive. Yoda was the first to arrive from Kashyyyk, and Windu could see the pain in the Grand Master's face, not from physical discomfort, but from the suffering that he had felt in the Force. So as more and more Jedi arrived from the Outer Rim, Windu and Yoda became more aware of the losses than the survivors. The sight of this provided them with a grim determination to finally put an end to the massacre, and the surviving council members quickly divided the other survivors to fend off the incoming clones, whilst they moved for Palpatine. As they planned their angle of attack, Anakin received a transmission from the subject of their plans, and the Chancellor wanted to meet Anakin in his working office in the Senate building. This was it, the moment that Yoda had waited for. The Grand Master looked at Anakin and nodded his head, and Anakin knew exactly what his role would be. With a quick glance towards the distant 500 Republic building and Padme's apartment, Anakin nodded back to Yoda and boarded his starfighter. As Anakin retreated into the distance, Mace Windu also boarded his own starfighter for the second part of the Jedi plan. Up ahead of him, Anakin had already arrived at the Senate building, and after leaving his starfighter in the capable hands of R2-D2, he walked down towards the base of the normally busy building. Though Anakin was expecting this lack of people, the stillness was nevertheless slightly disturbing as he soon approached one of the sliding doors adjoining the bottom level. When the set of doors opened, Anakin saw the office of the Chancellor. A pair of royal guards dropped their force pikes when Anakin passed through to the floor, and the chair next to the desk rotated to show Palpatine. The Chancellor put on his friendly face, but he could feel the tension and animosity from Anakin. Palpatine remorsefully told Anakin about the reports surrounding the Jedi, but Anakin was quickly growing tired and impatient of Palpatine's games. The Sith sensed this too, and modified his approach to reveal his true power. Palpatine now offered Anakin a place by his side, with the Jedi Order in a state of disarray, and also a way to save Padme. Anakin's lightsaber was on the verge of lowering as he fought off the manipulations of Palpatine in his mind when Mace Windu entered the room. The royal guards that had allowed Anakin through were shoved to one side, and the Jedi Master's lightsaber ignited to illuminate the area. Palpatine's own lightsabers thrusted from his sleeves into his hands, and it was time to complete the destruction of the Jedi. As Anakin stood between them, Palpatine joined the two who were standing, and the purple hue that was emitted from Windu's weapon was now mixed with the red of Palpatine's. The Sith Lord and the Jedi Master stared at each other with unrivaled intensity, but then Palpatine moved. The body of the Sith moved in a blur, both twisting and jumping over Anakin to meet the purple blade of Windu. The blinding speed of Palpatine would have been enough to decapitate most Jedi, but this was Mace Windu. As the two master duelists danced across the floor, Windu was immersed in the pad, and the darkness that Palpatine was exuding with each attack was looping back to him. Palpatine frowned at this lack of progress, and acrobatically flipped into one of the repulsor pods, which was normally used to accommodate senators. Windu initially wanted to chase him, but then he remembered Yoda's plan. As Palpatine gained elevation from Windu, Anakin seemed to be stirred into action, and he ran towards the Sith with purpose. The balconies and levels in the Senate arena also saw dramatic movement, as the Jedi executed the next stage of Yoda's plan. The surviving Jedi emerged from all angles to enclose Palpatine, and instead of jumping to engage him in lightsaber combat, they directed the other pods to the Siths. Palpatine jumped across the pods with great agility, then diverted them back to the Jedi. The balconies were now filled with wedged repulsor pods, so the Jedi jumped down to fight the Sith Lord. This was exactly what Palpatine wanted, and he blasted the leaping Jedi with a lethal lightning attack. Palpatine's cackles covered the sound of breaking spines and other bones, until a green projectile entered his field of view. The Sith's lightning attack was blocked by a leaping Grandmaster Yoda, who had been one of the last to enter the arena, and the Jedi was determined to prevent further casualties to the Order. Palpatine was forced back down to the ground level, with other Jedi closing in from above, but when his feet touched the ground, he had no time to recover as Anakin was there to intercept him, with Mace Windu closely trailing him. Windu had been recovering from his earlier duel with Palpatine, and after using his Shatterpoint ability, he identified Anakin as the focal point of the battle. Now, Windu watched as Anakin dueled the Sith Lord, and he curtailed his instincts to join in. Palpatine was expecting Windu to help Anakin, and also for the Jedi Knight to be tempted by his offers to join him, but Anakin's focus was not wavering. The Jedi Knight was not the chosen one without reason, and all of his potential was being unleashed against his former friend. All of the anger the Sith's deception was fueling each swing of his blade, and Palpatine's age began to show. The alchemy that had maintained his appearance was crumbling, and it revealed the face of a wilting old Sith, almost made from the essence of evil. Such was the intensity and power on display, the other Jedi could not approach them until a guttural groan emitted from Palpatine. The Sith's body wilted almost immediately after Anakin's last attack, and the Jedi were exhausted and relieved. The only sound in the arena was Yoda's cane gently tapping on the floor as he walked, and the Grandmaster moved gingerly toward of the injured Jedi. Those who were able to stand carried the injured away from the building, as the clones ruthlessly continued to activate Order 66 until it could be reversed. Though most of the Jedi returned to the damaged temple to heal, Anakin was off to the apartment of Senator Amidala, where the senator was in need of medical attention. Palpatine's false concerns about Padme's health were put to the back of Anakin's mind, and with the help of handmaidens and a midwife droid, Padme gave birth to twins. In her absence, the senators who were brave enough to return, or did not fear the repercussions of a new regime, all returned to the Senate building, so they could vote for an interim Chancellor. Once the senators decided on Mon Mothma of Chandrila as the new Chancellor, she set about undoing Palpatine's corruption, including Order 66. This allowed the Jedi to rebuild their order, and Anakin and Obi-Wan were at the forefront of this latest era.